Thank you so much, Dee.
Sorry about that.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking me to speak today. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm so excited to hear about your commitment to getting bills passed, limiting plastic single-use products. I mean, that's a huge, this is the kind of thing that's a big, heavy lift, and I applaud you for your hard work and determination. I think most people who aren't involved in projects like that don't understand the commitment and determination that's involved. And it's so important. And we're going to talk a whole lot about that and what I think about that today. But I will start by getting my screen shared here real quick. And oh, I want to go back to the beginning. Hold on, sorry. There I am. Okay. Can you see my screen okay now?
Yep.
Oh, good. Okay. So, hello, this is me. I'm Eve Schaub, and I'm the author of Year of No Garbage. And this is also me. I'm also the author of Year of No Sugar and Year of No Clutter. I like to say that I'm a serial memoirist. And I also, I kind of invented a job for myself where I perform experiments on my family so I can write about it. And here's my long-suffering family. And without them, I could not do what I do. I think one of the most engaging and interesting parts of being able to write about living in different ways that are out of the ordinary is being able to access different points of view. For example, a younger person's point of view, my husband's point of view, and so on. I think those are some of the best things about these projects. So I couldn't do it without them. How did I get the idea to do a Year of No Garbage? It all goes back in my mind to when I was a little kid and I was watching Sesame Street, and Oscar the Grouch was there singing about how much he loved trash. And one of the things that I noticed was that the trash that he loved and sang about looked nothing like the trash that we had in our house. He sang about rusty musical instruments and sneakers that had holes in them. But that is not what our garbage looked like in our house. In our house, this was in an era where I lived, we did not have any access to any kind of recycling at this point. Of course, there was no compost. I lived in a suburban neighborhood, and there was one big black plastic hefty bag, and it was under the kitchen sink, and that is what everything went into. It didn't matter what it was made of. It could have been organic material, it could have been paper or cardboard or tin cans, or any kind of plastic. Everything went all into that big plastic bag. And then once a week it would go be put in our trash can and put by the side of the road for someone to come pick it up. And I remember being a little kid and thinking, I wonder what happens next? And I wonder if it's anything good. Fast forward to many years later, and I'm an adult and living in Vermont, and I have my family, and I like to think of myself as a environmentally minded person at this point. I've learned a lot about the environment and about the importance of taking care of it, and what the choices that we make in our lives affect this. And so I shop locally and I go to the farmer's market, and now I have a compost pile in my backyard. I recycle everything I know to be recyclable in the single stream bin that we put by the side of the road once a week at the end of our driveway. I bring my bags to the store. Most of the time, I think of myself as being, pretty good in the environmental department. I'm aware of these issues and I try. And I see a lot of things on social media where people are talking about zero waste at this point. And I think to myself, zero, huh? I'm doing a lot already. I perceive it that way. And I wonder, how hard would it really be to do absolute zero waste, to do absolutely no garbage at all. And for the average person, you'd have this thought and it would just come into your head and perhaps go right back out of your head. I'm not that kind of person. Instead, I proposed this idea to my family, which consists of myself and my husband and our two daughters. And I say to them, what if we went for an entire calendar year without throwing anything away at all? And they are understandably wary, especially because they've been down this road twice before with me. And they know, as they did not perhaps once know, that when we do these projects, it is always a very big deal in terms of how much it affects our lives, our lifestyles, what we can do. And that it's not also just a year. It's something that ripples outward, that has ramifications that stay with us as we move through our lives, even afterwards. They know this is a big deal, and they know it's not going to be easy. So this is my truly terrible idea. No garbage, 1 calendar year. I'm very inspired as a writer by what I have come now to know is called stunt memoir writing. I didn't realize I was a stunt person. I think that this is the only world in which I could ever be a stunt person, so I appreciate that. And I really admire the work of folks like Morgan Spurlock, who did Super Size Me, Julie Powell, Julie and Julia, Barbara Kingsolver, Animal Vegetable Miracle. These are all people who've done a similar thing where they pick out the parameters, a time period, and they set rules for themselves. And they go off to this, what I think of as sort of a foreign land. They go to another place where they're going to live differently in some way from other people. And then they're going to come report back. And that's what I feel that my job is. And so when I conceived of Year of No Garbage, it was to me like Super Size Me meets the environmental movement. So here we are on the last day of December 2019. 2020 was the year we had designated. Once I talked my family into it, which took some doing, including promising them that this was the third and final installment in the trilogy of the Year of No. But that was okay with me. It was worth it to me to do that because I was so committed to this idea. So here we are, very enthusiastically throwing away, taking advantage of our last opportunity to actually use a garbage can for a very long time. So here were the rules. The rules were very simple. We could recycle, we could compost, we could repurpose things, we could fix things, we could give them away. The only thing with any material that we could not do was put it in a garbage can, which we know once it goes into the garbage can, eventually it makes its way to usually one of two places, the landfill or the incinerator. And I thought to myself, you know, how hard could it really be? We have a lot of resources at our disposal in this day and age. This wasn't back in the 70s when I was watching Sesame Street. This was, you know, in a very enlightened time when we have access to so many resources. And we have single stream recycling, which is the easiest recycling known to man. You just throw everything in, you make sure it's clean and dry, sure. But we could put so many things in there, not just the usual suspects of glass and paper and cardboard and metal, but also all 7 kinds of plastic. And I think most folks are familiar with the resin identification code, which is the chasing arrow triangle that appears on so many different plastic products and packaging that we bring into our home on a daily basis. So I thought, gosh, you know, how many other kinds of plastic could there really be? I figured we were probably in very good shape, and it would be just a very small matter to deal with what was left over after all that. We just had to get serious. So the first chapter is called This Sucks and Everyone Hates Me, which I think is the answer to the question, how hard could this really be? It was so hard. I knew it would be hard, but I had no idea. Immediately on January 1st, we started jumping in, as we always do, with both feet completely cold turkey, not really knowing what we're doing. And all I know is I can't throw anything away. So every item that comes into my house, uh, if it needs to be cleaned and dried and sorted, I do that. Even things like little foil rip off, like that comes on the top of so many liquids now, even saran wrap, you name it, I was dealing with it. Every material that came into the house was cleaned and dried and sorted. And immediately I realized there were so many things that not only did I not know what to do with them, but I didn't even know what they were. There were so many things that I'd look at the material and I'd go, it feels like this, but I also wonder, for example, wipes. We have makeup wipes, we have cleaning wipes, we have bathroom wipes. There's so many different kinds of wipes. They feel like cloth. Are they made of paper? Maybe there's plastic involved. I just didn't know. Cartons. I found out two different kinds of cartons, gable top cartons and aseptic cartons. And does that mean they're made of different things? I wasn't sure. They feel like paper again, but they're holding liquid. So how does that happen? Potato chip bags. There's this metallic kind of feeling thing. I think it's mylar. I'm not sure. So many different things. And I had this pile that started out small, very small, in the corner of my kitchen with things I did not know where they would eventually go or what I would eventually do with them. And I started out with my very adorable little mason jars. It was pretty. And then I realized very quickly that that wasn't going to hold everything. So I instituted in the corner of my kitchen what I called the super awesome recycling center, which was a sign of my optimism at the time. And I was, again, still sorting and this was my holding pattern for everything that, okay, so I just don't know. So I'm going to figure it out. And it got bigger and it got bigger and it started spilling out onto the floor. So you can see that my containers are now getting bigger. And here I am with my daughter Ilsa, and she's trying to help me make sense of this gigantic pile of stuff so that we can still use our kitchen and function like actual human beings. We need to come in and out and use this room. Here I am, totally overwhelmed. So if you ever wonder what it would look like if you just stopped throwing things away, here is one idea. And this brings me to my theory, which is that there's no such thing as garbage. That's what I started the year with this idea that there is no one thing that we can look at or point to and say that's garbage. It's really just a matter of context. It's really just a matter of how we feel about that thing that makes it garbage or not garbage. Because maybe we're done with that item, that object, but that doesn't mean that it's no longer useful. There could be someone else in the world who could do something good with that item. So I liken it to the idea of the fact that there's kind of no such thing as a weed. A weed is just a plant that's growing somewhere that you don't want it to grow. So my idea in this optimism was that all these materials would be useful to someone somewhere someday, if only I could look hard enough and find it. So here I am doing my washing and drying and sorting, and washing my saran wrap and tinfoil and everything. We had a lot of strategies at our disposal. Of course, we switched a lot of things from disposable items to reusable, such as the hankies you see here, handkerchiefs, and paper towels. And I started scouring the internet for different zero waste companies that could provide me with good solutions. And I found several that I like. And I scoured the local businesses as well to find places that would provide, for example, bread in a paper bag instead of plastic, or paper with plastic, as is often the case. Cheese I could buy in paper, glass without the heat seal shrink wrap plastic around the top. Of course, you can see here we're doing like the method where we wrap presents in either cloth or reusable materials or in newspapers. So we're trying all the usual things that you might think of first. We're trying to avoid single-use plastic and packaging. And of course, as we took our garbage bin, which is a 96-gallon container with wheels on it, like many people have and are familiar with, we took it from the corner of our driveway. We took that garbage bin and we parked it on January 1st in the far back corner of our garage, and we left it there sad and lonely for 365 days. And instead, we turned to the recycling bin that was of equal size, 96 gallons, and we put it into overdrive. We were anything that was allowed to go in single stream, we were putting in there. So all the usual suspects: plastic 1 through 7, glass, aluminum, tin, cardboard, and all. We also were composting. I know that composting is not for everyone in theory, but I think it's a wonderful way to deal with material that you don't know what else to do with. Not only were we putting our food scraps out there now all the time instead of most of the time, but we also put other organic material. We could take the hair from our hairbrushes. We could take Kleenex if we happened to be using that before we switched to our reusable washable hankies. We use dish towels for paper towel jobs, but every once in a while you're going to have a job that's so disgusting that you really want to use a paper towel, right? So in that event, we'd take that and put that into the compost. Also, people talk about things like pizza boxes. They're made out of cardboard, but they often get food on them. So any item that actually genuinely is just paper and you've got food on it, that can go in your compost as well. And then when all else failed, I started posting on online message boards. For example, FreeCycle is a good one. We also use Front Porch Forum, which is available here in Vermont and a lot of other states as well, I understand. Or there are many local message boards, and I would post on there, hey, I've got a whole bag of plastic caps, and can anybody out there use them? And inevitably, there would be someone who could. So that was another great technique. And then I still wasn't dealing with absolutely everything, as you can imagine. There were still plenty of things that were hanging around waiting for me to find the good thing that could happen to them. And so I started discovering what I called extreme recycling. Probably most of you are familiar with the plastic film recycling bin at the supermarket. Well, and I was aware of it, but what I didn't know was that you can put a lot of things in there that aren't plastic bags. You can put bread bags, you can put bubble wrap, dry cleaning bags, Ziploc bags. They accept a lot of things into those containers that I think many people are not aware of. So I started doing that. I also discovered the Carton Council, which accepts all those gable top and aseptic cartons as long as they're clean and dry. Now the catch is I have to clean them and dry them and put them in a box and mail them, pay to mail them to one of 4 or 5 different locations around the United States. That doesn't sound very sustainable to me, but I was desperate and this was a solution. So there was that. And then we also found out about other kinds of recycling that involved a greater commitment, such as actual pay-to-play recycling, such of the sort that is offered by companies like TerraCycle. So you pay money, they send you a box in the mail, you fill it up and you send it back to them, and they promise that they will do something very good with those items. No, and in some cases, no matter what they are, they'll take just about anything as long as it's not a used diaper or toxic waste. So to return to the question of what all these materials were that I was encountering, the quick answer is if you don't know what something is, it's plastic. It's always plastic, or it's partially plastic. In all of these cases that I was wondering about, it was, the cartons and the wipes and potato chip bags and so many more. They're amalgams of plastic with other materials. And once those materials are scientifically smooshed together in these manners, they're not coming apart again, ever. They're married forever. So that poses real problems for trying to recycle these materials. Now, there are people who are out there, as I mentioned, claiming to do so. But the shorthand is, if you don't know, it's plastic. Always, always, always. So the top 10 things, I compiled this list of the top 10 things you probably didn't realize are plastic. Receipts. Would you like a receipt? No, I don't want a receipt. Dental floss. Would you like some PFAS in your mouth? The dental floss is a terrible culprit of plastic, and in particular, we'll get into the toxic chemicals that are involved in a minute. Wipes, cigarette filters. So hot plastic that you're breathing, terrific. Tampons, not only the applicator, not only the packaging, but also the actual tampon itself has plastic in it, unless you're buying one that's specifically marketed not to. Tea bags. So again, hot plastic. We'll get into the toxic ramifications of that, but that very bad, very bad. We're talking microplastics. Whenever you see vegan leather or faux leather, and people are thinking this is so much better environmentally and so on, it's plastic. It's always plastic. Yoga pants, of course. Most of the clothes in your closet have plastic in them, of course. Nail polish, and even pavement. So if you don't know what a material is, it's plastic. Plastic was the Darth Vader of our year of no garbage. Far and away, the bad guy. So here we are getting confused, like so many people, I think, by all the signs and symbols and, you know, things that are supposed to make recycling easier, but actually just end up confusing so many consumers who are trying to do the right thing. I think our whole outlook was changed once I happened upon the class that was taught on Zoom by Judith Enck, who is the founder of a group called Beyond Plastics and is also a former regional administrator for the EPA. My issue was that I was doing so many deep dives into these materials. I was calling companies, I was emailing them repeatedly because they would answer one question, but then I'd have 10 more questions. And, you know, I would call people repeatedly in customer service, and I did a lot of research on websites. And what I found is that there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of disinformation out there. And there's also so much information that it's just that people just don't know. Like, you'll call a company and they're using packaging, but they can't tell you what's in it. Now, and often this is food packaging. So this is very distressing. I mean, I compare it to when we did our year of no sugar, and I was in luck because whenever you go to the store, they're required by law to list all the ingredients, every single one on the side of the product, tell you every single thing that went into it, but they don't have to tell you what goes into the packaging. So I was looking for an authoritative resource, and I was kind of desperate because everyone seemed to be either they didn't care, they didn't know, or they had an incentive to tell me something that was not true. Judith Enck was my authority that I could count on. So I signed up and took her class in the fall on Zoom of 2020. And this is when I found out, finally, at long last, the truth. The truth was far worse than I had ever imagined in my wildest dreams. And so that was a really watershed moment for me. Not just what are we going to do with plastic, but what's wrong with plastic? There are so many things that are wrong with plastic. But as regular consumers going about our day, we are trying to do the right things. I think so many of us are. And this is a study that bears that out. When people are asked, what do you recycle on a regular basis? The number one answer is plastic. 85% of people, when asked, when prompted, will say, what do I recycle? I recycle plastic. But how much is actually getting recycled? Only 5%. This is what I learned when I took the Beyond Plastics class. Now, that's horrifying and surprising because we've been trying to get better at recycling plastics ever since I was a kid. So we're talking decades now. the industry has been assuring us and promising us and telling us if we just recycle better, if we just recycle right, everything will be okay. When it comes to plastics, 5%, when you compare that to other statistics we know, 68% of paper and cardboard, 70% of steel cans, 50% of aluminum, 5% is an abysmal failure. So it's not getting recycled. We know that. That's bad. If single stream recycling isn't getting plastic recycled, what about the extreme recycling programs that I referred to that we were using during our year of no garbage? Well, the problem with plastic film recycling, mail-in programs, pay-to-play recycling, there's no one making sure that any of these things are actually happening. There's no penalty for if they don't do what they say they're doing. There's nobody minding the store. So what I started to find was that there were lawsuits. And there were documentary films that were coming out showing footage of bales and bales of supposed TerraCycle recycling. Now remember, people have paid money, not to mention invested all the time and energy in making sure these items were clean and dry and taking them, packing them in a box and sending them off to TerraCycle. These bales of supposed recycling were ending up in places like a Bulgarian concrete incinerator. I found that deeply disturbing. And I think anybody who in good faith is trying to do something good for the planet and has this happen instead would also. So if we're putting all our plastic in recycling, if 85% of us are trying hard, but it's not actually getting recycled, so what's happening to it instead? This is what's happening to it instead. This is, to my mind, the worst possible outcome of us trying to be good about recycling. I think you've got, what is happening is that it used to be all our plastic recycling went to China. In 2017, they implemented Operation, what was it called? Shield. Shoot. Okay, I'm blanking on that. I apologize. They implemented this ban on import of plastic recycling, understandably, because there's nothing good to do with it, as it turns out. So the United States has collected all of this plastic, National Sword, that's it, National Sword. So they have collected all of this plastic. Where's it going to go? It's not supposed to go to the incinerator. It's not supposed to go to the landfill. Let's ship it overseas and people will forget about it. So it's ending up in countries that are impoverished and do not have the infrastructure to prevent this or to deal with it. So you've got places like Vietnam, Kenya, India, Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand. These are their landscapes that we're looking at here. I learned about this when I watched the film The Story of Plastic as part of my class with Judith Enck. And what I learned as a result of knowing this information is that plastic is a form of environmental racism, that we are taking our problems and making ourselves feel good that we have found solutions when in fact the exact opposite is what's happening. I think it would be better for this material to end up in a landfill or an incinerator than to be strewn across the playgrounds and landscapes of these people in these countries who cannot rectify the situation. We also have the fact that plastic, from its inception in the fracking process, which is where plastic comes from, through the creation and the manufacturing, through the distribution, and then finally the disposal, we know that plastic contributes significantly to climate change. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. It also is placed in communities that are impoverished and communities of color. All of these, whether it's the fracking or the actual manufacturing facilities for plastic, they're emitting toxic chemicals all the time. So they're placed, again, another instance of environmental racism. So it's not getting recycled. It fosters environmental racism. And then we also know that plastic is overwhelming our natural environment. I think many of us are familiar with the video of the turtle with the plastic straw in its nose, but it goes, of course, so much further. The albatrosses that are feeding plastic to their babies and then dying. Plastics are being found by scientists, not just in the ocean, not just in the air, but in the most remote parts of the planet, at the top of Mount Everest, at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. So plastic is overwhelming our natural environment. We have the whales. Whales are washing up dead on our shores with, bellies full of our plastic bags and lawn furniture. So this is where I was going a minute ago when I got ahead of myself, which is that every step of the process of the creation of plastic through to its use, consumption, disposal, every aspect of it produces the emissions that cause climate change. So if plastic were a country and you added it all up, it would be the 5th largest producer of the emissions that cause climate change. I think most people don't, but even people who understand that there is a plastic waste crisis and that plastic is a problem, might not make the correlation that plastic is directly related to climate change. So it's not getting recycled. It fosters environmental racism. It's overwhelming the natural environment. It's driving climate change. But there's more. And that's because plastic is such a miraculous material that we have as human beings with our big brains. We've invented this amazing thing. It's quite a phenomenal material. But unfortunately, that also means that it lasts longer than anything else known to man. It does not break down. It breaks up, which means it breaks into little tiny pieces. It does not biodegrade at all, ever. It just gets smaller all the time. And when it gets small enough, it can infiltrate the human body. And it is. And now we are all walking repositories of microplastics. We all have microplastics in our bodies. Every place that scientists look for microplastic in the human body, they find them. In our blood, liver, lungs, in our brains now, they recently found, also in breast milk, also in placenta, and the very first poop of a newborn baby. This is extremely distressing. I just like this picture, food of the 2030 food pyramid. Microplastics being a fundamental part of it. One of the things I will encourage everyone on the call here today, please, please, please do not heat your plastic that contains food, because heat actually accelerates the process by which the chemicals that make up plastic and the microplastics that are in it are shedded, are emitted. And so those things are going into your food. So, when you buy one of those convenience meals and you're heating it up in the microwave, please take it out of the plastic packaging, put it on a regular plate before you heat it up. So we know that plastic is shedding microplastics, not only into the environment, but into our drinking water and into our food. And it's not just when plastic gets hot. We also know that the older plastic gets, it becomes more brittle and the shedding of microplastics accelerates. There was a very famous recent study called the Danish water bottle study, where they took a regular brand new athletic water bottle. They filled it with room temperature tap water and they let it sit overnight. And the next day they tested it and it had 400 different plastic related compounds in the water at that point. This is so distressing. I can't even tell you. Think about all the parents who are out there who want to make sure their kids are getting hydrated at their sports events. And what are they giving them? They're giving them a nice big glass of microplastics in the process. So why is that distressing? What does it matter that we all have microplastics in our bodies? Well, it's important for people to know where plastic comes from. I mentioned that plastic comes from fracking. Plastic is made from fossil fuel and toxic chemicals. Those are the two ingredients. And there aren't, as it turns out, 7 different kinds of plastic. There are tens of thousands of different kinds of plastics. And most of them are proprietary combinations that we're not even allowed to know what are in them. You know, these are company secrets. But we do know that the chemicals that are used are toxic. And when I say toxic, I mean things like heavy metals, persistent organic pollutants, PFAS, which are the forever chemicals that we're starting to hear much more about now. These are known endocrine disruptors, known carcinogens, known fertility inhibitors. And I do think people are starting to become aware that this is a problem. This is a terrific article that came out in the New Yorker. I feel very honored because my book was included in it. So I had to put it in here. So plastic is not getting recycled. It fosters environmental racism. It's overwhelming the natural environment. It's driving climate change, and it's toxic, and it's finding its way into the human body. We all, by the way, I'm sure many of you have heard this statistic, we're all eating 5 grams of plastic in our food every week. The human body finds it difficult to get rid of this plastic. We don't just, you know, we do poop some of it out, but a lot of it is getting stuck in the different organs of our body. And that's because plastic is oil-based and the human body is water-based. So, big takeaways from my year of no garbage is that the plastic waste crisis is directly related to climate change. I think that's very important, and we should all be talking about that all the time. But it's not just about climate change. It's worse than that. It's not just about the turtles and the polar bears. This is about ourselves. This is directly related to the health of your body and the health of your children's bodies and your grandchildren, and whether or not you might even be able to have grandchildren or great-grandchildren. I like to reassure people because I know this is a lot, and it can be a really big downer. It can feel overwhelming to realize just how bad the plastic waste crisis is and how many ramifications it has for so many things. And when you start to look around and try to think, how can I avoid it? It's not avoidable in our current existing culture and society. This is something that I don't think we agreed to, but it has happened. So I say the plastic waste crisis, we can't say, don't take that all on. This is not your fault. You did not ask for this personally. You know, this is a thing that has happened. It's a phenomenon. It is the fault, however, of big oil. Big oil, of course, is big plastic. They are one and the same. They have limitless funds to lie to us about recycling of plastic and that it's inert and doesn't hurt the human body and that we're going to clean it up out of the oceans and everything is going to be just fine. They have untold amounts of money and people who are on the job to assure us that everything is just great in the world of plastic production and that it's a miracle material with no downsides. Big oil wants to triple, by their own admission, they're very proud of this, they want to triple plastic production by 2050. We need to hold them accountable. We need to say, we don't want that. As citizens of the planet, as consumers, that's not something we need. I don't know anyone who says to me, I need more plastic in my life. I don't think anybody needs triple the amount of plastic that they already have now. One of the reasons, by the way, that big oil is pushing plastic so hard is because they see the writing on the wall for fossil fuels and that people are switching and don't want to drive the cars that use fossil fuels anymore. So making more plastic for big oil is plan B. So we have here global plastic production, and we can see it's really not that long ago that we didn't have very much plastic production at all, or none. This is only in a matter of a couple of decades that this situation has been created and the plastic waste crisis has been generated. But here's where they want us to go. I find this really astounding. And I think we can do something about this. We can talk about it. We need to make sure that the media is covering this issue. Personal responsibility of the kind that my family and I engaged in when we did our year of no garbage is important. But like I said, I didn't cause the plastic waste crisis personally, and I can't solve it personally. So it's not the whole picture. If every person on this call goes out tomorrow and decides they're going to buy a bamboo toothbrush, that's not going to fix the plastic waste crisis. It'll be a good thing, but that by itself will not fix it. So what can we do? Well, we can be those personal responsible people and avoid plastic when we do have choices. And sometimes the choices are very blatant, like in the case of these eggs here in plastic packaging versus cardboard. We can seek out other solutions, such as I found a place that's, a 15-minute drive away where I can get my milk in glass bottles. We can, of course, bring water bottles, but not plastic ones. We can ask when we go to the coffee shop, hey, could I have that in a real cup? And I'd say 70% of the time, my experience, they will say, yeah, okay. But more than that, what I have found is that another thing that just happens when I am in my year of no garbage head is that I slow down. And it's like I want to throw something away, but I have to sort of stop and spend another moment. And sometimes a moment is all it is to say, where else could this object go? Who else might be able to get use out of this thing? And that's like a change of mindset. That doesn't cost money. It just means we have to be a little more thoughtful as we go about our day. Most of all, in addition to the personal responsibility, we can support legislative and corporate change. Now, corporate change, I don't have a lot of hope for because they've had decades to do this and have not. I think the corporations, by and large, they don't see how this profits them to change things. And so they won't. And I guess I can't blame them in that regard because their whole purpose on Earth is to earn more money all the time. And so we have to turn instead to legislative change. So, of course, you guys are familiar with that because legislative change can be a plastic bag ban. It can be a styrofoam ban. It can be bottle return bills. It could be an act that is wending its way through Congress. And currently we have at the UN level, the Global Plastics Treaty, which is being negotiated right now. I think that's incredibly exciting. But I will caution everyone that that the plastics industry is onto us. And so they are starting to co-opt our language. So when we say extended producer responsibility, for example, as something that we as consumers, as citizens of the planet want. We want extended producer responsibility essentially means that if you produce it, you have to clean it up. You have to take care of what happens to this product at the end of its useful life. Well, they have co-opted that term, and now they say that extended producer responsibility includes burning plastic. And they use lots of fancy words. They will throw a whole word salad at you. Advanced recycling, chemical recycling, pyrolysis, repolymerization, waste to energy. Waste to energy? That sounds great. Everybody should be in favor of that. No, it means burning plastic. That's what all of these come down to. And don't be fooled and don't support them. Uh-oh. I'm not going forward anymore. Oh, there we go. Okay. Here's a terrific resource. The Beyond Plastics website. I encourage everyone to check out Beyond Plastics. There are a lot of wonderful anti-plastic waste groups out there. Beyond Plastics is my favorite. And they have local groups and affiliates all over the country. I think they're up to 100 now. So this is a terrific resource. If you are looking at a bill and saying, I don't know if this is a good bill or not. I don't know if this term is another euphemism for burning plastic, for example. You can turn to Beyond Plastics and you can ask them and they will tell you. Lastly, I know a lot of people will say, I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I can't afford, to spend the energy and resources to go buy products that are friendlier to the planet. I say, well, number one, now that you have this information, it's going to change the way you view the world. You're going to move through the world differently. And sometimes that just means asking for something different, say when you're buying a coffee. Maybe it means buying something different at the store, but also it can mean telling somebody. And I always think that it's important to, instead of being like this, what's in that, I never find that approach to be very helpful. Instead, be like, wow, did you hear this? I just, this blew my mind. And that's really the approach that I have is one of, instead of being overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, this problem is it's too big, it's gone too far. Instead, I say, no, now we know the truth, which was very hard to find and get to the bottom of, but now we can do something about it. Having that information is power. And my feeling is that awareness is the starting point for all meaningful change. So go tell somebody. And is life without plastic even possible? It may not be. And that's okay, because there are many wonderful uses for plastic, including medical uses. We know that 50% of our cars are currently made out of plastic. The glasses I'm wearing right now are made out of plastic. Our phones are plastic, our computers. There are many things that we may end up as a society deciding, okay, this plastic is worth it, this. But 40% of the plastic produced every year is single-use disposable plastic packaging. So my feeling is that that's the low-hanging fruit, and that's where we need to start. So our family went from throwing away religiously every week. We somehow managed to come up with 96 gallons of trash that we wheeled out to the corner of our driveway to be picked up by our garbage service providers. That was pre-Year of No Garbage. In the aftermath of Year of No Garbage, we do now throw things away again. It is a fraction of what we used to, as you can see here. We went from throwing away 96 gallons of trash every week to now we throw away nine gallons of trash every week. So that's a tremendous difference, and it's largely a function of us slowing down and paying more attention. I'd like to go even further, of course. Everything that's in that trash bag right there is single-use disposable plastic packaging from food that we could not figure out how to avoid. What I found is that I could not manage to actually feed my family on the amount of food I can buy that doesn't have any plastic packaging at all. It's excruciatingly difficult to do. So that is where we need to look. We need to look at our plastic packaging for food. And as you can see, only a couple of decades ago, somehow we managed to eat food without any plastic packaging at all. So I see it as very doable. The bottom line, plastic is not our friend, and we need to make less of it, as much less of it as we possibly can. So this is me. I do a lot of very silly stuff on social media because I think you need to have a good sense of humor when you're dealing with subject matter that's pretty heavy. I hope folks will take a moment to follow me on whatever social media platform you prefer. And I'd be happy to talk about any questions that people have and anything I might have missed.
Eve, that was terrific. I wish I could just like bottle you up and take you with me down to the legislature. And I don't know, if I could get them all to just watch this hour, that would be awesome. You just packaged up our whole message right there so succinctly. So thank you. I know we're going to open it up for Q&A. If anyone, I'm sure there are lots of questions out there. One thing I wanted to maybe ask you, you sort of alluded to this, but I know you touch on it in your book, But you stated early about, throwing 1 through 7 plastics in the recycle bin, and I just want to make sure we um, make it clear that hopefully everybody knows you can't put all 1 through 7 in your curbside bin. And I know that's one of the things you wrestled with in your year of no trash.
It's a really good question, and I'm glad that we're going to clarify that point. So I think, of course, as you know, most people know that the different providers will tell you different things. Our garbage service provider, who we no longer use, by the way, but when I called them during this year, they reassured me, oh yes, put all plastics number 1 through 7 in there. But if you talk to anybody who knows anything about plastic recycling, they'll tell you, okay, 1 and 2 are the only plastics that have any hope of someday possibly being recycled. So 3 through 7, no way. It's not happening. And so that's where we get into the problem of it's being put in a place that's supposed to be recycled, and it has nowhere to go. Do not bother. Don't do it. Just accept, and that's what I do now. In fact, I'll tell you, and this I think some people find this surprising. I don't put any plastic in recycling anymore at all. Now that I know how toxic plastic is and how poorly it recycles, and on top of that, once you recycle plastic, just like when plastic gets older or gets heated, it sheds more of the toxic chemistry that makes it up. We also know that when you recycle it, it sheds more as well. So you're just encouraging more of this toxic chemistry. I mean, I really don't want to buy food that's wrapped in recycled plastic for that reason, because it's going to be shedding still more. And now it's a toxic cocktail because it's a whole bunch of plastics that have all been Frankensteined together. And then those toxic chemicals are interacting with each other, and in many cases creating new chemicals that nobody even knew were there.
So that's an argument against the legislation that requires a % of recycled content.
So to be used in,
I guess there's some a movement to get laws passed that would require a certain minimum amount of packaging to include a % of recycled plastic.
yeah, I hate to say it, but I am, now that I know everything I know, I am against plastic recycling as a whole. And I personally feel that that is a misdirection of our efforts. Instead, we need to focus on, we need to make less plastic, we need to use less plastic, and we need to be more forthright and honest about what genuinely happens to it when we are finished using it.
Agree. Yep, agree. Well, thank you. I'm sure there are other questions out there. If anyone wants to pop in or raise your hand, or did we stump everyone today?
I didn't really touch on the fact that 2020 was, of course, the year of the pandemic, and that when March rolled around in our year, this is another factor that I talk about in the book, that all the lovely plans that I had laid out for strategies, like I'm going to go to all these different local stores because they're going to be more likely. I'm sure you've encountered this when you go to a big chain supermarket. They don't want to hear about you bringing your own container. But if you go to a local store, they're way more likely, especially if they know you. They're like, oh, yeah, sure. Or they'll be more likely to, wrap something in paper instead of plastic, especially if you indicate that's something you're interested in. So I had like all of these plans. I was going to go here for my meat and here for my bread. And, I'm driving all over creation. So again, that's not so great for the environment. But again, I'm desperate, right? So I'm trying to figure out these solutions. And then the pandemic descends. Boom, boom, boom. And all of a sudden, all the local shops, they either don't want to hear about you bringing your own anything in the door, or they've shut entirely, right? So I had all these strategies that were out the door, not usable anymore, and I went into oh shit mode, right? And then my daughter and her boyfriend, who were supposed to be doing the project in Brooklyn, well, everything they were doing, school is closed, work is closed, everything's closed. They decide to come to Vermont. We tell them to come to Vermont, and they're living with us. So instead of giving us, it was supposed to be they were going to give us a city version of what we were doing in a rural area. But instead, they come to Vermont, and they ended up doing the whole project with us here in Vermont. So it changed everything, but it caused us to sort of we hit the pause button and went, hold on, can we even do this at all? And is it okay? I mean, there's a lot going on in the world right now. Should we really be focusing on washing tinfoil and tying rubber bands back together again? Is that even okay? And we ultimately came to the decision that, even though the pandemic had to take priority, this also was an important issue, and we would persist because life isn't going to wait. The world rolls on, and it's still a problem, and we still have to deal with it. So that was a conclusion we came to, and we had to double down. We had to find different solutions. So I'm not sure who raised their hand first. Cheryl?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I ironically just went to a bakery and I ordered a loaf of bread, and the woman was going to take this gorgeous loaf of bread, slice it, and put it in a plastic bag. And I looked at her and I said, "Can I have a paper bag?" She looked at me like I was freaking insane. Like, she works in a bakery. She should know baked goods should go in paper.
Yes.
But this habit of plastic for everything. So I won't drink water out of a glass bottle. I won't drink anything out of a glass bottle. But I do, like, for example, have a pocketbook that's made out of recycled plastic bottles. Is that still giving off plastic?
Okay, so the answer to that question is it is, but I would not be nearly as worried about it. The primary ways that we bring microplastics into our bodies are through breathing and through eating and drinking. So, just touching plastic, unless you have a lesion on your hand, and then, maybe you take some lotion out of a plastic bottle and you put that on, there's going to be microplastics there, and it's going into your body that way. But normally your skin is a good protection against the microplastics. So I'd say, we have to sort of choose our battles. And for me, in my house, what I do is I focus on the food, because I feel like that's the big, I'm mainlining microplastics unless I pay attention. So I don't carry a plastic water bottle anymore. I've become anti-plastic water bottle. I used to be all like, yay, hydration. And now I see it differently. But I wanted to also address your going to the bakery. Yeah, there you go. Going to the bakery, if you go there on a regular basis, she'll get accustomed to this request. Another thing I do is I have a cloth bag that I just use for bread, so that if you want to just have her think you're even like completely bonkers, more bonkers than she already thinks, you can bring your cloth bag in. But even just asking for paper, which is far preferable to the plastic, I think we normalize it every time we ask, right? So we were talking about this just at the top of the meeting before we started, this idea of what we all agree on as a society that is normal. And so we can make this decision to change what's normal. I know that when I travel to some places, I'm astounded at how far ahead of my small rural Vermont communities some places are. And I'm also astounded at how far behind some places, I'll go and get food, and without asking, they'll put it in styrofoam and then wrap it in like 3 different plastic bags, and they'll throw in like a whole bunch of plastic cutlery that's also wrapped in plastic. And oh my God, so you have to sort of like be alert when you least suspect it. And you can ask, you can say, hey, you could leave out the cutlery, or you could leave out all those little sachets of ketchup. And, it's just a matter of everywhere you go, sort of being very polite and friendly and saying, this is what I'd prefer, please. Next person, Bridget?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I love this. And I put a question in the chat about what was easiest for you guys to switch to, and what was maybe like the hardest thing, or either switch or give up. Because so I'm a mom of a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and it is hard to not use plastics.
Oh my God.
And everything from, with my first one, like we did glass bottles and everything, but then the second one needed special bottles which only had plastics in them, and it was the only way we get her to eat. And so like we then switched to all glass, food containers and everything. But it is hard. And like the preschools don't want it though. They want everything in plastic. And so it's been a battle. And not even to mention, like, no matter how much time I try to spend prepping food and those kinds of things, we always end up having plastics, stuff in sachets, which I, try not to use. But thoughts, recommendations?
Oh, whoa. Okay. Many times over the course of our project and since, I have thought back to when my girls were small, and I shudder, like all the things I did. Oh my God. And, in particular, the one image that haunts me is the little plastic sippy cup that they would just gnaw the top of.
Yes.
And I didn't think anything about it at the time. And now I'm like, oh no. I think that, again, of course, you have to pick and choose your battles. If it's a matter of my child needs to eat, that's it. That's, if this is the way that it's going to happen, and I've exhausted all other options, then that's what you got to do, of course. I know that diapers are another thing that haunt me. I used to put disposable diapers, I'll admit it, with my girls. I would love to see things like the return of the diaper service. That's something that my mom used with me. That's not that long ago. Why can't we bring things like that back? What about the milkman? I write about that in the book as well. We used to have a milkman who would, and this seems like the Stone Age, but he would bring milk and leave it in this little box by the door. And then, nobody worried that it would disappear or that someone would tamper with it. It just, so I think that we need to, be alert for when solutions present themselves. And there are going to be things that the solutions aren't there yet. I do have a bunch of resources that I really love, and I list them in the back of the book. And I'm also planning to, on my website, that's like one of the very next posts I want to make, is like, here are all the resources that I love for all the different things that I've discovered. And I think if we can all share our resources, and find these things and support them and encourage more to exist in the world. I know that my daughter, she's going to high school, and here I am with the glass bottle, and, it kept breaking, like trying so hard to be good. And she's like, Mom, it broke again. Okay. It's not comfortable, it's not, and that's why, there's this, why it's such a heavy lift is because as a society, we've all kind of somehow gotten to this place where we've agreed this is normal. And how do we get out of that? And actually, I don't think I mentioned this, and I like to mention this, that people talk about the demand for plastic. And I don't think there is a demand for plastic. I don't think the plastic waste crisis is a demand problem. I think the plastic waste crisis is a supply problem, which puts it not on the consumer, but instead on the producer. This is big oil, this is big plastic. It's their fault. And so we need to put it on them and say, we want different now. And that's a process that takes a lot of time and a lot of people. And it's going to be a while. And so there are going to be many things like, we like to think we have so many choices. We go to the supermarket, look at this wonderful, I have freedom of choice. Isn't it wonderful to live in this wonderful culture? But, then you try to buy cheese without plastic and you see that you don't have as many choices as you might have thought. You try to buy organic produce without plastic labels or plastic saran wrap because they're trying to differentiate between the organic and the regular. There's so many things that we don't have actual choices. So just focus on the things that you do and always be on the lookout for more. I hope that's helpful. I know, Richard, you've had your hand up for a while.
Mute.
Actually, I think Debbie was ahead of me.
Oh, Debbie, do you want to go?
Either way. So I was curious if you have pets, because we have 3 cats, and I cannot figure out a good way to deal with the kitty litter and the waste in the kitty litter, because it's a hygiene issue too. And we generate so much waste, and I don't know what to do without plastic.
Yes, yeah, no, excellent question. And I do address this in the book a bit because we have 3 cats also. So I can speak to this. We started buying, they're like wood pellets. And you can use those for litter. Now, of course, if your cat is fussy and doesn't like the litter to be, to be different or changed, those are all issues that you'll need to deal with. But what I found was when we actually went to adopt our kitty cats, that's what they were using at the shelter. They were using wood pellets, and I write about this in the book. I was like, oh, I didn't know you could even do that. I was using that horrible like silicate stuff because it absorbs, everything. But then what do you do with it but send it to the landfill, And they're like, oh no, this is great. You can also use chicken feed. And I'm like, what? So there are a bunch of natural materials that are available that you can use. You can buy.
So how did you dispose of? I'm curious how you dispose of the waste, because you can't really compost it. I mean, it's a health issue.
Okay, so that's an issue because you're right that you have to worry about toxoplasmosis.
Yeah.
And so what I do, I struggled with that. And then what I ended up doing was instituting, because I'm lucky I have a yard, right? So I have one compost pile that's for food scraps. And then I have another one where I dump the kitty litter.
Okay.
So that's, unfortunately, I know that's not going to work for everyone.
Yeah.
But that's how we handle it here in our house. I don't use any of the plastic bags that, the pan liners. I don't use those. I just put it right in the pan and then I dump it, rinse it, refill it. So I think, I wonder if do you have composting available in your town, and would they accept it for that? Because,
Bridget could answer that question.
What's
I
that?
don't think so. I think it's a no.
No.
Short answer is no.
Yeah, so that's another one that, I think maybe we don't have the answer yet for everybody, but for folks who do have the ability to, throw stuff in the back of their yard like me, that's what I'd recommend.
Yeah.
Richard?
Yes, thank you. First, I wanted to say your presentation was fantastic, and it seemed to cover all of the bases. I'm with Plastic Free Delaware, and we're an affiliate of Beyond Plastic. And thanks to Dee, we've been working in Delaware. We've got the plastic bag ban passed and a ban on styrofoam and straws by request only, and we're working on other things. But one of the things that you touched on a little bit was extended producer responsibility. And you mentioned that you don't think that recycling is really the answer to dealing with a lot of this plastic waste. What specific things do you think should be or could be included in an extended producer responsibility bill or something similar? It doesn't have to be called EPR.
Right, because terminology is important, right? And just as we've all started to wrap our minds around what extended producer responsibility is, they go and start trying to change what it means. So that can be frustrating. But I think that the important thing, and Beyond Plastics has started to hone in on this, is talking about reducing packaging. So saying, okay, maybe we have to use a certain amount of plastic, but how about we use less? And I know I said that I'm personally not in favor of using recycled plastic or recycling plastic at all. But what about, having sort of a fee involved, or tax, something that addresses, because of course money is where the companies will start to pay attention, right? It's perhaps the only thing that will get companies to pay attention, is when there's a fee involved or a tax or something that is meant to address, here's how we handle this material. And just, wild optimism aside, I currently don't see any good, happy place for plastic to go or be used again once we're done with it. Single-use disposable plastic packaging, we need to reduce that 40% number, first of all. And then we need to understand that the rest of it, there's no good places for it to go. I heard a wonderful analogy not that long ago, where the person was trying to describe recycling plastic, and they said it's like if you had like 20 different kinds of cheese, and then all these leftover bits, and then you put them all together, mixed them up, and tried to make a new cheese. It doesn't work. It won't taste good, it won't look good, and it won't hold together and do what cheese is supposed to do. That's kind of what recycling plastic is like, just on a very like practical level. But then on top of that, you layer in all that toxic chemistry and how very bad it is. And I just think that we need to accept that plastic is a miracle material, but it also has some very serious drawbacks, including the fact that once we're done with it, there's nowhere good for it to go but a landfill, where it will just sit. It inspires me to use less of it all the time.
We spoke early before we got started this morning about Delaware and the bag ban, and how we had a little trouble implementing it because we kept trying to put a fee on paper. And Richard is leading our efforts on EPR, trying to look at EPR, or whatever you want to call it, and how we might move forward with legislation here. But again, we know anything with a fee on it is going to be a problem in Delaware, because Delaware prides itself on being tax-free. So we've been trying to find, how can we somehow focus the EPR issues or solutions in a way that doesn't use a fee. So that's our dilemma.
Well, is there a way to make that fee not affect the consumer, but instead
it doesn't really matter?
Doesn't matter.
The legislature is
Any
just
mention
really
of a fee.
hesitant. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? We can propose one, but I just think that it's going to be difficult. Anything with a fee on it is seen as a tax, no matter who's getting charged.
Yeah, well, I will throw out there that, not everybody agrees with me. Beyond Plastic's official stance is that 1s and 2s are recyclable and that we should keep recycling them. But, this is the conclusion that I personally have come to, and it's just, at a certain point, we all know plastic is bad. We know we need to make less of it. We need to do everything we can to make less of it, to buy less of it, and we need to get it away from our food.
Now, our messaging agrees with you. We do not focus on recycling. We focus on reduction. So we try not to delve too much into encouraging recycling, but so anyway, Dave, I know you've had your hand up too, and I've promised Eve not to keep her too long. So let me get to you.
Well, I'd like to turn to Carol Summers, because she put a message in the chat ages ago asking about raising her hand, and maybe she's got something to say. I'd give up my spot for her.
Carol Larson.
Carol
Carol
Larson. I'm sorry.
You're unmuted, Carol. Oh, now you're muted.
No, I just wanted to say that I had a question about 4 and 5 plastics. I know that they get recycled at Ecoplastics of Delaware, and wondered if that was workable if you have a special situation like that.
What are they doing with them?
Making benches and raised bed boxes and lumber, and
Yeah, I mean, you can chip up including ones and twos, and as Judith Inc. will say from Beyond Plastics, she'll say very occasionally number fives. But it's so limited, and
It's a very limited situation.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to tell people, I say the vast majority of people should be aware that in most situations it's only ones and twos. And even then, what happens is not always a great thing. I mean, making, say, outdoor decking or a picnic bench is the very best thing that could ever happen. It's not going to be ever anything better than that. But also, how many picnic benches do we really need as a society? If we took every single piece of plastic and turned it into a plastic bench, I think we'd be like, shoving aside plastic benches to try and make our way to work every day.
Oh yeah, first reduce, then go to.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
and I like to say, yes, I understand that there are things like that happening, but I worry that they become diversions, that they encourage, a false sense of we've solved the problem, a false sense,
I got you there, definitely.
So I want people to understand, no, that's not the greatest, like, solve everything solution for this, and we should not rely on it as such. David, did you want to ask a question?
Well, I just, yeah, I'd like to encourage a little bit of speculation here. And Richard, I'm looking at you too, because I read things like Future Perfect, which comes out either from the BBC or Vox, I can't remember which. But, they're publicizing things like nature is evolving bacteria and things like the Indian meal moth have the capacity to metabolize plastics. Of course, at the rate that our sperm counts are dropping, we'll be extinct by the time they catch up to the plastics. I'm not proposing to wait around. The other thing that I saw in one of those articles, though, was that the barcode on your piece of fruit, that little sticker, indicates actually indicates the grower that it came from, wherever it came from, and so it got me thinking about barcodes. Now I'm old enough to remember, the bottle bill in Delaware, and deposit bottles, which were made with thick enough walls that they didn't very often break. They had to go back to the plant. They were refilled by the beverage manufacturers. And so suppose with national leadership, it became possible for us to take our barcoded plastic containers back to the supermarket, having paid a deposit on them initially, and then you run them through the checkout and get your deposit back. The supermarket is prohibited from landfilling them. They have to send them back to the manufacturers that produce them. And here's a new rule for our postal service: the government could make it free to mail this stuff back to whoever produced it. And eventually, this stuff will find its way back to the oil companies, and they will be the ones who are responsible for running these extraordinarily large bacteria vats that will digest this stuff down to water and carbon dioxide. And because we won't let them put it back in the ground. That's just toxic. So that's a fantasy. Thanks.
I like that fantasy. I think it's great. We need fantasies. I think fantasies are where actual ideas develop and come from.
Can I ask one other quick question?
Uh-huh.
If nobody else has their hand up.
Oh, we do
What do you
have
think of glass and glass recycling?
So glass recycling, like all traditional material recycling, I think is a good thing. I think that unfortunately, due to single stream recycling, glass recycling is now down. And that's because people are putting glass in and it's getting all broken up into tiny pieces and it's harder to sort out and actually use. But the good thing is when they make new glass, they actually want this material. They need it. The used glass helps them make the new glass, is what I've learned. And so that sounds to me to be a perfect solution. We just need to get better at it. We used to have a better recycling rate of glass before single stream was invented. I think single stream recycling, although people love it because it's convenient, it also it's just, in many ways, it's a false solution. It doesn't create better recycling. We just think it does.
Thank you.
I have one more, and I know
Follow up?
you gotta go. But yeah, so we implemented the plastic bag ban in Delaware a couple years ago, and Dee and I are on some discussions with the state environmental control group. And one of the concerns from them is that instead of now using disposable single-use bags, a lot of people have gone to like that thicker, more reusable plastic bag instead, right? And so their biggest concern is now we have an abundance of those, and they're gonna, some of, a good portion of them are eventually making their way to the landfill, and the thinner plastic bag was a better option. That's their argument, right? And personally, I'm of the mindset, the more that we can encourage people to reuse and start that behavior change process, because it's a hard thing to do. That's why I'm such a big proponent of that. But I was just curious what your thoughts were on that issue.
So this is a very typical problem when you have a bag ban, and then they institute, oh well, now we'll use these bigger bags that use more plastic and they're reusable, but then people don't actually reuse them. That's, now you've made the problem worse, right? You're disposing of more plastic. I think that what we do here in my supermarket is actually across the state border, so it's in New York. But I think Vermont and New York are similar in this regard, that we both have plastic bag bans. And when you go to the supermarket, you have a couple choices. You can bring your own bag. You can buy for 5 cents a paper bag, or you can just carry your groceries out in your arms. And so a lot of folks around here are very thrifty, and they want to save that 5 or 10 or 15 cents. And if they do not remember to bring their bag, they'll carry stuff in their arms, or they'll put it back in their cart and put it all piece by piece into their, so again, sometimes a financial disincentive, I guess, can be helpful. When people feel like, oh, well, I don't, it causes them to stop and think for a moment. Do I really need that?
Eve, just to clarify Bridget's question, we had to actually do 2 bag laws, one to tighten up the first one, and which we followed New Jersey, and we which requires stitched handles. So the bags that she's referring to are not like the heavy disposable plastic bags, but actually the handled, reusable, supposedly 1,000 uses reusable. But okay. Our DENREC is still concerned that eventually those do go to the landfill. So that's,
are they finding them at the landfill though? I mean, is that a current phenomenon, or is this just a
that's
projected
what we're
worry?
kind of scratching our heads, because
we're trying to figure out.
I can't imagine it's really a huge issue.
Do they cost money?
Yeah.
Those bags?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh,
it's not a mandatory fee, but most stores are charging for them. Absolutely.
Right. So I think both of those, that's like, if it costs money, people are much less likely to throw it away. That's just my personal take on it. And if they know, hey, if I go to the store and I don't bring my bag, I'm gonna have to buy another one. Yes. I think most people, again, this is about sort of getting people to envision a new way of doing things and just acclimate to it, right? And if they see other people doing it,
as Bridget alluded to, it's sort of the on-ramp to other behavior change.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. It's the first step.
But I mean, unless they can actually come to you and say, this is a problem right now. People are throwing these bags away, like crazy, which I don't know. I don't understand that concern. I don't see why that would end up happening. Roger.
Oh, just a very quick comment. I put it in the chat also that number 5 is polypropylene, and that's readily compatible in the melt. If you melt the polypropylene and polyethylenes, low density, high density, and medium density all together, they generally are in the same melting range and co-extruded, or should it not be a problem. So I think Ecoplastics products usage of polypropylene and benches and planters and whatnot is pretty good. Pretty good.
Fair enough. Yeah, I just don't want to eat food out of it.
All right. Well, I promised Eve we'd be done by 1:15, so extra special thanks for overstaying our welcome, and can't thank you enough. It was really fabulous to have, hear your book, at least portions of it. I encourage everybody to get a full copy, and one way or another, and explore even further the journey that her family went through. And thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the wonderful questions. You guys are clearly like right up there in the fight and very engaged and very informed, and I appreciate you.
Were those claps I saw, Sally and Beth? Okay, thank you. Can't tell if it was claps or hand raising. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon. And again, Eve, thank you.
Thanks so much.